Thank you for being here. I'm David Foster, the Executive Director of the BlueGreen Alliance. We're here today to talk briefly about perspectives of labor and environmental organizations in the United States on both the Durban talks and the state of emissions reductions in the United States. For those of you who aren't familiar with this, the BlueGreen Alliance has been a fast-growing labor environmental coalition in the United States made up of 11 of the country's largest unions, 4 of the nation's largest environmental organizations with about 15 million members. We want to get into presenting some of the views of our BlueGreen Alliance partners this morning and then make a few comments about our Jobs 21 program in the United States. So to kick off the discussion today, we have Larry Schweigert, the president of the National Wildlife Federation. Larry.
Thank you, David. It's great to be here. National Wildlife Federation is an organization of about 4 million members and supporters from around the country, and we are really pleased to be a part of the BlueGreen Alliance. And I personally believe that it's extraordinarily important to work together to solve this incredible problem that we're all facing. And I think a great example of the kinds of progress that we can make is the recent auto rules that have been agreed to and are moving forward through the process. These rules, I think, will bring stability to the auto industry, will bring clarity to their targets in terms of the kinds of vehicles that we're building. But in addition to that, we'll create literally hundreds of thousands of new jobs, both in building cars and also in building trucks for the future. And we're pleased to be a part of that important conversation with the BlueGreen Alliance and others because we think it's the right thing to do. And in the end, we'll reduce the amount of fuel that we use. We'll create cleaner vehicles. We'll make our air in the urban areas cleaner. We'll help protect our climate. So in my mind, those are the kinds of, that's just one example of the kinds of things that we look forward to doing with the BlueGreen Alliance. And David, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Larry. And now I'd like to call on Roxanne Brown from the United Steelworkers Union. Roxanne.
Thanks, Dave. As the nation's largest manufacturing union, the Steelworkers is committed to ensuring that our industries and our members work for transition into the clean energy economy, and specifically our industries, by taking measures to become cleaner, more efficient, more globally competitive. But it's also really critical for our union and our members to see these basic industries serve as the foundation for the clean energy economy in the United States. And Dave, I think, was going to touch briefly on the Jobs 21 campaign that we're having in the United States. But we believe that that campaign that BGA is engaged in lays the policy framework to build and attract and grow the clean energy economy in the U.S. And absent these really critical policies, the U.S. will continue to lag behind the rest of the world in GHG reduction and in the growth of the clean energy economy. So right now, back in the U.S., there is a tax extenders package that is going to be considered, and we would urge that Congress include necessary policies like the extension of a production tax credit for renewable projects, as well as an extension of the 48C advanced manufacturing tax credit for domestic manufacturers. The PTC expires at the end of next year, and it's a really critical incentive for the development of wind projects in the U.S. Without it, wind projects pretty much don't exist in the United States. And the 48C tax credit is critical for U.S. manufacturers who are supplying component parts for wind, solar, and hydro and other clean energy applications. And these policies will not only help advance the renewable sector in the U.S., but for the unions who are a part of the BlueGreen Alliance, they're really critical with respect to retaining and creating millions of new jobs. And I'll just end by saying, for our union, as we look at the clean tech sector, we look at applications like a wind turbine, which on average has 335 tons of steel, 4.7 tons of copper, 1,200 tons of concrete, and 3 tons of aluminum. And our members in the United States make all of those products. So we want to make sure that every single one of those industries and others play a role and sustain the clean energy economy in the United States. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Roxanne. And now I'd like to call on David Hawkins from the Natural Resources Defense Council. David.
Thank you, Dave. NRDC is a citizen organization based in the United States. We also have an office in Beijing. We have 1.3 million members and supporters, and we are very proud to be members of the BlueGreen Alliance. We have always made the point in talking to audiences about environmental regulations that, the money that we spend to protect the environment, to protect public health, to protect the climate, that money doesn't go to Pluto. That money stays right here on planet Earth. If we're smart about it, it stays in places like the United States where we build goods and services that people want and value. And those goods and services mean jobs. So the idea that there's a conflict between the environmental protection goals and jobs goals is simply wrong. We spend the money on different things, but we do spend the money and we do hire people to work at good jobs producing those goods and services, as Roxanne has just pointed out. As Larry mentioned, we've had a very successful recent example in the automobile standards, and next up are standards for coal-fired power plants. This is the major source of pollution for greenhouse gas pollution in the United States, and EPA is under a court settlement to go ahead and move forward and propose standards. And yes, there will be the usual screams and controversy about these standards and their impact, but we have to remember that we don't value electricity for itself. We value it for the services that it performs, for the heat, for the comfort, for the light, and having more kilowatts of electricity doesn't necessarily mean more comfort. I think this room with these lights is a good example. We need to come up with smart ways of delivering those services, and the more we internalize the costs that providing electricity imposes on society, the smarter we'll get at producing electricity that makes us more competitive and doesn't destroy the planet while we're doing it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. And now I'd like to call on another one of our labor partners, Stuart Acuff from the Utility Workers Union of America. Stuart.
Thank you, David. It's an honor and a privilege for me and the Utility Workers Union of America to be here today. Converting to a green energy economy in the United States would create hundreds of thousands of jobs in the utility industry. Updating our electricity grid and our electricity infrastructure, running transmission lines from wind turbines to centers of population centers, and helping to erect wind turbines and solar panels. All of that requires good, skilled workers, which the Utility Workers Union has. I have to say that we have a very serious jobs crisis in America. We've had 30 years of widening inequality, and that inequality gap is growing wider every day. And we see mitigating climate change or being responsible about climate change and converting to a green energy economy as a way with our partners to create millions of new jobs, not just in the energy industry, but across the economy. However, we are under assault in the United States from a getting harder and harder radical right wing that is assaulting both workers and the economy. And that's why we're so happy to be, that's one of the reasons we're so happy to be a part of the BlueGreen Alliance and to see our partners from the environmental community not just working with us on environmental issues, but also on workers' rights issues. And the assaults that we've undergone this past year, particularly in Wisconsin and Ohio, our environmental partners have stepped up to help us beat back the assault on workers' rights, particularly in Ohio, where we defeated SB 5 by 62%. We couldn't have done that without the help of our environmental partners. So this is a critical project that we're in, and we are very grateful to our environmental partners for their partnership.
Thank you very much, Stuart. And now I'd like to call on Alden Meyer from the Union of Concerned Scientists. Alden?
Thanks, Dave. And sorry I was late. I was just listening to the chair downstairs of the LCA tell us what the work program is going to be and which issues he's sending to ministers. I'll be happy to talk about that if you want to in the Q&A. But let me just say I've been working in partnership with unions in one way or another since I started in this business fresh out of college 36 years ago. And to me, it's essential that workers and environmentalists recognize we are the same people. We are not divided. Every one of us works. Every one of us lives in the environment. If we let the corporate interests and the right-wing political forces divide us, as they have successfully done on some issues, we lose. There's no way around that. We don't have the power if we're divided. United, sometimes we have the power, sometimes we don't yet have enough power, and we need to bring in other constituencies. And I think we can see that with some of the things going on back home now. Let me just say two things about the power of this alliance. Back home, as Stuart said, we have stood in solidarity with labor on their fights, and they have stood with solidarity in us on our fights, and that is huge. It's the only way we can win, and we greatly value the support of the BlueGreen Alliance for preserving the authority of the government to move forward to protect the public health and safety from the threats posed by climate change. These are real threats. They are mounting daily. They are imposing hidden costs on workers and communities in America. You don't see these costs. They're in your health care bills, your property tax bills, your state tax bills. You're paying the cost, but it's not marked on those bills. And meanwhile, those who oppose us have created this frenzy about the much lower costs of taking aggressive action to move clean technologies into the marketplace to avoid the costs of damage from climate change. We need to get the balance sheet right and talk about this in a different way back home. And finally, at this process has value because it's talking about setting rules and standards and processes for all the major countries of the world to have a level playing field when it comes to competitiveness, trade, industries, technologies, etc. It's important that we launch a process out of Durban that will bring not just the United States, but China and other major developing country emitters into a level playing field down the road, probably around 2020 or so. That is essential, but it's also important this process generate higher ambition right now to move technologies into the marketplace so that we can avoid the worst impacts of climate change. It's also important this process deliver a strategy for ramping up long-term finance for developing countries to help them deal with the impacts of climate change, deploy clean technologies, and reduce deforestation. And many of those initiatives will create jobs for American workers back home because we are still leaders in many of these markets producing these technologies.
Thank you very much, Alden. When all of us in the Blue-Green Alliance were confronted with the challenge in 2010 with the failure of our Senate to pass comprehensive economy-wide climate legislation, we were forced to confront the necessity of adopting another path forward to achieve real emissions reductions in the United States. And it wasn't difficult for us to come to the conclusion that in the U.S. there was a path that was based on smart regulations, effective partnerships with the public and private sector, and targeted investments. In the Blue-Green Alliance, we then bundled all of these approaches to climate change into a comprehensive proposal that we called Jobs 21, Good Jobs for the 21st Century. Stuart mentioned the crushing unemployment problem that exists in the United States today and many other countries around the world. In spite of some slight reductions in the last month, official unemployment is 8.6%. Real effective unemployment in the United States is currently above 17.5%, the highest it's been since the Great Depression. And there is little thought among most economists that left to its own devices, this economy is going to start generating enough jobs to replace the 8 million jobs lost in this recession until 5 to 10 years from now. That's why Jobs 21 has become so important in the politics of the United States, that we need a strategy that aggressively grows the economy, but grows it in a direction that creates a sustainable basis for growth into the future. We simply don't want to go back to the problems of the economy of 2008. Jobs 21 is based upon protecting and preserving the Environmental Protection Agency's authority to regulate greenhouse gases. Very important that a long-term framework is created that gives investors and businesses a sense of how energy will be produced and generated in the United States. It's based upon such things as the fuel efficiency standards that the Environmental Protection Agency has again proposed for the United States, a set of regulations that our studies show will produce over 200,000 manufacturing jobs in the auto and parts industry in the United States as we go forward by 2020. It includes the aggressive pursuit of things like renewable electricity standards that exist in 29 states in the U.S. already and lay the foundation for the ramping up of the production of renewable energy and the manufacturing infrastructure below that. And it includes things like the implementation of California's landmark AB 32 Global Warming Solutions Act, which is our partners have collaborated on going forward, putting 20% of the U.S. economy under the same kind of regulatory framework and cap and trade framework that exists in Europe. All of those are the basis for the U.S. hitting near-term reduction targets, more importantly, creating the foundation for an economy that can aggressively grow and produce those 8 million jobs that we need to get Americans back to work. Public support for climate change solutions is linked to our ability to create economic solutions to the unemployment crisis. That's the fundamental goal of Jobs 21 and the task of the BlueGreen Alliance as we go forward. So with those comments, we'd love to throw it open to reporters here to ask questions of any of our panelists. Yes. Could you identify the publication you're from?
Almost forgot the drill there. Mm-hmm. Chris Hawley from the Energy Daily out of Washington. I just wonder, as we move forward, what is it going to take for the United States to adopt legally binding legislation to price carbon, either through a tax or a cap and trade system?
Anybody want to jump in, Alden, on that?
Well, as I've been telling delegates in international media here, this process should not wait for the United States, because I think it's clear to everyone that our politics is dysfunctional on this issue, that one of our two major parties has been almost wholly captured by the skeptics, the denialists, and the right-wing think tanks. I just saw today that the last remaining presidential candidate, John Huntsman, who had stood firm in the belief that climate change is real, is now flipping and saying we need more science, the world scientists don't agree, and it's not global and it won't work. I've heard these messages for years. So one of our two parties, there's some major work that has to be done. Some of us are doing work in that area with evangelical faith leaders, with retired generals and admirals, with the agricultural sector, with the business community, but that effort is not yet up to the task of taking on the Tea Party movement, the right-wing think tanks, and the well-organized denialist movement, which has captured the Republican sort of agenda on this and threatens defeat, frankly, of candidates who take the risk of voting for climate legislation. You could see that in Mike Castle being defeated in Delaware in the primary, in part because he voted for the Waxman-Markey bill. So we've got a lot of work to do on that side of the aisle. We also have work to do on the Democratic side of the aisle, I think, as the Senate experience showed. And we have to get the message out to the American people that this is an urgent and a real problem. It's affecting them now. It's imposing costs on them now. It's affecting their lifestyle and their future prosperity, and is going to leave a ruined world for their children and grandchildren if we don't act. And that appeal gets some of the members that we need to move around. It was the way that we got to Senator John Warner to become a leader on this issue, through his grandchildren. And I think there's a moral and ethical dimension of this that we have to be much more forcefully working with the faith community to bring out to the American people. We are about to leave our descendants a wrecked planet if we don't start acting much more aggressively.
I would say, make one comment myself, that I do think in the United States there's one view that says we simply have to wait to take on carbon pricing schemes in the United States until the economy improves. In fact, I think we believe that moving forward is exactly the way to get the economy moving again. And that's the issue that we are raising in the 2012 elections in the United States. And if we do our job right and frame up the fundamental question of the election as to how do you create jobs in the American economy again, do you do it by simply relying on cyclical market forces to generate jobs, or do you do it through targeted, serious intervention by the government through this kind of three-pronged attack of regulations, investments, strong public-private partnerships? And if that view predominates in the United States in 2012, then I think you'll see us back on the path toward doing something in the comprehensive climate legislative arena. Any other questions? Yes.
Jean Shemnick from Greenwire. What does other countries moving forward without us mean? I mean, does it mean moving towards a binding commitment, emissions reduction commitment, or is it something else? And is there a practical movement to do that?
Well, that's the whole debate that's going on in these halls right now. You see the European Union signaling it's willing to move forward and stay in Kyoto if there's a process to bring other major players in over time. Obviously, they want the United States to be one of those players, but I think they are also aware of our constitutional regime, which requires 67 votes in the Senate to ratify a treaty, 7 more than the 60 that we couldn't get in a heavily Democratic Senate last year to do the domestic legislation. It is a very heavy lift. And frankly, some of us are starting to talk with parties here about a way to move ahead without the U.S., leave a docking station for the U.S. to come later on when our politics matures, and build incentives for countries, including developing countries, to enter into such regime because they would get access to technology, intellectual property rights, markets, and other things that countries outside the regime wouldn't get. It's not likely that other countries are going to use punitive measures against the U.S. like border taxes or sanctions or that kind of thing, but I think there could be positive incentives for countries to move forward that would frankly produce an incentive for the government and the businesses of the United States to rethink this and join, because otherwise they would be losing out on markets and technologies.
Other comments, questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions. Any last comments from any of our Blue-Green Alliance partners today?
I would just say, with respect to the question you asked about what it will take, I think a huge component to this whole thing is education. Much of what Alden said, and that's really why the Blue-Green Alliance exists and why we pull together 11 labor unions and 4 environmental partners, because each of us are responsible for educating our respective constituencies around the importance of these issues. And I think we had a lot of success doing that around the Waxman-Markey bill, particularly, our members who are from these industrial sectors who are traditionally, emitters of these bad emissions that we're trying to reduce, getting them to understand why it's so important for the U.S. to take these steps to mitigate our emissions was key to our union really affecting some of the changes that we were able to do in that bill and help to advance it the way that it did. So education is definitely a key component of this.
And just to add one small example of the value of the Blue-Green Alliance, it's because we're in the Blue-Green Alliance that we were able to have conversations now with the Service Employees Union, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees Union, my old friend Joe Uline. He used to be the Director of Strategic Campaigns for the AFL-CIO and is on UCS's National Advisory Board. We're now talking with those unions to help them quantify the impacts on state, county, and municipal budgets of responses to climate change. Chicago is spending over $1 billion putting in an expanded stormwater drain system because of heavy precipitation linked to climate change. That's just one example of ways that climate change is imposing costs on state, county, and municipal budgets, which means less dollars available to hire workers, pay benefits, pay pensions, pay health care. So this is a bread and butter issue for some of the unions as well, not just an environmental issue. And I think by doing that, we can work together to get leaders at the state, county, and municipal level to quantify the impacts of this and to demand action from the national leaders, because this is having real-world economic impacts on their budgets.
All right. Thank you very much. I guess we have time for one more comment. Stuart?
Yeah, very, very quickly. We in the trade union movement see this as an investment in America, in the future of America. And not only creating jobs, but investing in a stronger energy infrastructure, which is critical to the future of the United States. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much, and thank all of you for